Michigan has a moderately regulated late fee framework where the key limitation comes from case law rather than a specific statute. The governing law is found in Michigan's landlord-tenant statutes, primarily the Michigan Truth in Renting Act, MCL 554.631 through 554.641. Along with the Housing Facilities Licensing Act, the Summary Proceedings Act for Evictions, and general contract principles. If you're a landlord or tenant in Michigan, the late fee rules are shaped more by court decisions than by a single clear statute, which creates some ambiguity that landlords need to navigate carefully. Let's start with the key principle. Michigan does not have a specific statute that caps late fees at a defined dollar amount or percentage. However, the Michigan Truth in Renting Act provides important protection. Under MCL 554.633, a lease provision is void and unenforceable if it violates a duty imposed or right created by the Act or by applicable law. The Act prohibits lease provisions that require the tenant to waive any rights or that impose obligations inconsistent with the law. Michigan courts have addressed late fee reasonableness through case law, and the standard is that the fee must be a reasonable pre-estimate of the landlord's actual damages from late payment. The fee cannot function as a penalty. This is the standard liquidated damages analysis. The damages must be uncertain at the time of contracting, and the fee must be a reasonable estimate. What's reasonable in Michigan? Case law and industry practice suggest that fees in the range of 5 to 10% of the monthly rent, or reasonable flat fees corresponding to documented administrative costs, are generally defensible. Michigan's rental markets range from expensive in certain Detroit suburbs and Ann Arbor to very affordable in many other communities, and the fee should reflect the local rent level. Michigan does not mandate a specific grace period by statute. There is no state law requiring a defined number of days before a late fee can be charged. If your lease says rent is due on the 1st and a late fee applies on the 2nd, that's technically enforceable. However, standard practice among Michigan landlords is to include a grace period of 3 to 5 days, and many property management companies in the state use 5 days as the default. The Truth in Renting Act does require that lease terms be clear, conspicuous, and not misleading. A late fee provision that is buried in fine print, written in confusing language, or presented in a way that the tenant cannot reasonably understand may violate the Act, even if the amount itself is reasonable. The provision should be clearly stated in plain language. The lease must clearly specify the late fee terms. The lease should state the rent due date, any grace period, the exact fee amount or formula, when the fee triggers, whether additional charges apply for continued non-payment, and whether the fee is defined as additional rent. Michigan courts expect written agreement. Oral arrangements about late fees are not enforceable. Compounding late fees in Michigan must satisfy the reasonableness standard. A single one-time fee after the grace period is straightforward and defensible. Daily or weekly compounding structures that could accumulate to a disproportionate amount are vulnerable to challenge. A compounding fee that could reach 20% of the monthly rent within a few weeks would likely be struck down as a penalty. Most Michigan landlords use a single flat fee to avoid this risk. The interaction between late fees and the eviction process in Michigan is governed by the Summary Proceedings Act MCL 600.5701 through 600.5759. Michigan's eviction process for non-payment requires the landlord to serve a 7-day demand for possession. The demand gives the tenant 7 days to pay the rent owed, and if the tenant pays within the 7 days, the eviction stops. Whether unpaid late fees can be included in the 7-day demand is an important question, and the answer depends on how the lease defines them. If the lease defines late fees as additional rent, they can arguably be included in the total demand. However, Michigan courts have been cautious about including fees beyond base rent in the 7-day demand. Some courts require that the demand include only the unpaid rent and that late fees be pursued separately. This is a jurisdiction-specific issue. The practice varies between district courts across the state. Best practice: define late fees as additional rent in your lease, but be prepared for the possibility that a specific court may not allow late fees in the 7-day demand. Having a clear lease provision gives you the strongest argument for inclusion. Michigan's Summary Proceedings Act also provides that the tenant can redeem the tenancy by paying all rent owed before the judgment for possession is entered. The redemption amount should include only amounts that the specific court will recognize, including compliant late fees where the court allows it. Michigan's Consumer Protection Act MCL 445.901 through 445.922 prohibits unfair, unconscionable, or deceptive business practices. Systematic overcharging of late fees, particularly if combined with failure to properly disclose the terms, can constitute an unfair practice. The Act provides for actual damages, attorney's fees, and in some cases, exemplary damages. This creates meaningful risk for landlords who charge fees significantly above their actual costs. Michigan limits the security deposit to 1.5 months' rent. The deposit must be held in a regulated financial institution, and the landlord must provide the tenant with notice of the depository. The deposit must be returned within 30 days with an itemized list of deductions. Unpaid late fees can be deducted if the lease authorizes it and the fees are reasonable. Failure to comply with the security deposit requirements can result in the landlord being liable for twice the deposit amount. For tenants receiving housing choice voucher assistance, common in Detroit, Grand Rapids, Flint, and other Michigan cities, landlords should not charge late fees when the housing authority's portion is delayed due to processing. The tenant cannot control the authority's payment timeline. If the tenant's portion is paid on time, the fee should not apply simply because the total rent hasn't been received. Michigan does not have a major active-duty military installation, but Selfridge Air National Guard Base near Mount Clemens generates some military demand in the Macomb County area. The SCRA applies to any active-duty service member renting in Michigan, including activated Guard and Reserve members. From a practical standpoint, Michigan has a diverse rental market with several distinct metros, each with different late fee dynamics. Detroit is Michigan's largest city and has experienced significant transformation. The downtown and midtown areas, including Corktown, Brush Park, and the Woodbridge neighborhood, have seen revitalization with increasing rents and a professional tenant base. In these revitalized areas, tenants generally pay on time, and late fee enforcement is minimal. However, many Detroit neighborhoods remain very affordable, with rents of $500 to $800. In these neighborhoods, late payment rates are higher and late fee enforcement is a more regular part of operations. Late fee amounts should reflect the lower rent levels. A fee that's reasonable on a $1,500 midtown rent is disproportionate on a $600 East Side rent. Detroit's active tenant advocacy community, including Michigan Legal Services and the United Community Housing Coalition, regularly assists tenants who challenge excessive fees. Landlords in Detroit should ensure their fee practices are clearly reasonable. Grand Rapids has emerged as one of Michigan's strongest rental markets, driven by healthcare, manufacturing, furniture industry heritage, and a growing food and beverage scene. Rents have increased significantly. Late fee enforcement is standard. Most Grand Rapids landlords charge flat fees with 5-day grace periods. Ann Arbor, home to the University of Michigan, has one of the tightest rental markets in the state. Student demand drives pricing, and rents near campus are high relative to the city's size. Student late payments correlate with financial aid processing. The grace period typically covers the delay. Lansing, the state capital and home to Michigan State University, has a diverse market combining government employment and student demand. East Lansing near campus has a tight student market. The broader Lansing area is more moderate. Kalamazoo, home to Western Michigan University, has a student-influenced market. The Kalamazoo Promise Scholarship Program has affected the local economy and demographics. Flint has an affordable market with economic challenges and higher late payment rates. Traverse City has a growing market with tourism-driven demand and seasonal workforce dynamics. Holland, Muskegon, Saginaw, Bay City, and other Michigan communities have varying market conditions. The Upper Peninsula has small markets with very affordable rents. Limited economic opportunity and harsh winters constrain demand. Late fee amounts in up communities should reflect the local economic reality. One best practice for Michigan landlords: draft your late fee provision to comply with the Truth in Renting Act's clarity requirements. Use plain language. Make the provision conspicuous, not buried in the middle of a dense paragraph. State the fee amount, the grace period, when the fee triggers, and whether it's defined as additional rent. A clear provision satisfies the Act and prevents disputes. Another best practice: set your late fee based on documented actual costs and calibrate the dollar amount to the local rent level. Michigan's market variation is extreme. A percentage-based fee of 5 to 8% automatically scales to the rent level. A flat fee should be adjusted by market. $50 on a $1,200 Grand Rapids rent is 4% reasonable. $50 on a $500 Flint rent is 10% at the upper end of defensibility. A third best practice: understand how your local district court handles late fees in eviction proceedings. Michigan's district courts vary in whether they allow late fees to be included in the 7-day demand for possession. Know the practice in your specific court before filing. Including the wrong amount wastes time and can result in dismissal of the eviction action. For the complete guide to Michigan late fee laws, visit tenantscreeningbackgroundcheck.com. Subscribe to our channel for every state in our late fee law series.